So how many of you were able to do some practice? Can I get some idea about that? Last couple of days? So I'm waiting for some responses. How many of you were able to spend some time on trying something? What really was covered by Rishin? Don't feel shy in coming up. In fact, we saw some interesting participation in the quiz a day before yesterday, and I'm sure my team will be showing you the leaderboard for that, who has done pretty well. And are there new people in the board? We'll see all those things very soon. But yeah, so guys, one thing that while we wait for some more people to join and we will start, I see a message from Mukund Rajan. I tried different programs using this. Fantastic, Mukund Rajan. I think, yeah, I mean, that is what is very important, because simply just understanding the concept does not give you that proficiency that you are looking for, right? So it is very important for you to go and try, and don't try too complex programs. I mean, see, complexity in the program will come ultimately. See, right now, what you need to do is basically be familiar with some of these concepts which are important. And once you have, you know what, I'll tell you how exactly I started driving. And I was taken to by one of my uncles to one of the ground which was empty, and I was told that, look, this is gear. You have to first of all start the car, keep the car neutral, and then you take it to the gear one, apply the clutch, and then release the clutch slowly, and start pushing the pedal, acceleration pedal, and the car moves. I thought, oh, it is so easy, and I got the fundamentals of driving in 5 minutes, and I was so excited that, okay, fine, I have got that now, so I can drive. But I bet all of you would have gone through that stage in life. If not, then you will go through that. It took so much time for me to start get the car in motion after several attempts. The fine balance between the clutch releasing and the acceleration, that's something which no book can teach you, where no faculty can teach you. So that you will have to experience by yourself. And after some time, when you get that adjustment, when you start, when your muscle memory gets into your brain, after that you don't need anything else to drive. And of course there are now automatic cars and all, but I was just trying to give an example. How do you acquire a skill? Acquiring a skill is not just knowing the concept, but it is very important for you to go and practice that, pressing the acceleration button, pedal, and releasing the clutch. Now, the balance that you need to learn, that balance I'm talking about, and that is where we have intentionally kept some gap between the two sessions, so that you have ample time to go back, look at things, practice them, okay, and come back with your questions in the class to Rishan, for example. Yeah. Absolutely. I am seeing, one message from anonymous attendee. It is always good to give yourself a name that really helps. And I do appreciate, don't worry, even if you have missed some classes, some sessions, that's fine. It's always, you can always go back and watch these sessions in our IBC Media's YouTube, channel playlist. I will request my team to share the link once again here. All these sessions, video recordings are available there, so you can always go through that, listen to that. You know, one thing that I can tell you that nowadays, getting access to content is not important. I mean, that you get anywhere. Go just Google it, and you will get hundreds of content. What exactly we are trying it different here is that we are taking you through that journey. That is important, and that is where it is important for you to go through those, and of course, try all other means that you have, at your disposal, right? Wonderful. So we will wait for a few more minutes. I think I wanted to have, I don't want to have people miss the beginning. So we'll just wait for a few more minutes before we kind of start. Until then, yeah, so let me ask you another question. So how many of you feel that Web3 is the future, and why do you feel so? Please feel free to chat, give me your comment. I would like to, in fact, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback as to, do you think Web3 is the future of the internet? And if at all, why do you think so? Come on, the leaders, the thought leaders. Yes, Mario, I think, why don't you go ahead and put your comment in the text. Dinesh Chaudhary, okay. Sir, I think nowadays the world is on Web2, which is website development, okay. And what do you think, Dinesh, about the Web3 being the future? So it will be upgrading. Absolutely. Mukuntraj, I see Web3 combined with VR is the next big thing for more sophisticated life and experience. Very well said, Mukuntraj. It's very important that how these virtual realities and the mixed reality that we call, they are changing the way we live. In fact, you don't need to, you don't need to go to the shops. In fact, there are places where we can go and experience the physical world just from your comfort of your home, right? And then, of course, that's the tech part. More than that, I think Vishwanath is talking about, because it is decentralized, right? And the real power comes in decentralization and getting the power in the hands of the community, enabling the community to participate in the business. Now you become a stakeholder in the business. Is that not important? I mean, just being a consumer, just being a purchaser, that we all have been through our life. But what if somebody says, okay, you go and buy from here, and if you buy things from here, I will give you equity in the company. I mean, there cannot be a better model than that, right? Now, I'm not saying that there is no problem in that. Of course, when any technology, if you know and look at the Gartner's hype cycle, any technology, when it comes, in the beginning, it becomes, it really gets highlighted. Then the real problems start coming in, that people start looking at those problems and start coming up with some solutions to those. And then there is a maturity curve where the technology stabilizes. And once this technology gets stabilized, after that, you really see the real value, of the tech. For example, if you remember the dot-com boom and crash that really happened, a couple of decades before, That the same thing was there. Everybody jumped into the game there, and everybody started creating websites. The problem was that many of them or most of them were not solving any real problem. So the whole .com crashed. But from that ashes only, many companies, successful companies came. In fact, I was looking at one of the companies which in the luxury sector, they were one of the first companies to start, the uh, to start the whole shopping in Web 2, right? So, guys, we'll start very soon. Give me a couple of minutes and we will start. Yeah. So I see some more responses here. ANOVA, I think that Web3 is in need as the technology evolves. Absolutely. Very, very correctly mentioned. Sumit Jaiswal, for privacy, Web3 app will help to prevent data leak. See, I think there are many technologies which kind of helps you do that in terms of the data leak and in terms of uh, security. But I think it is more than that, in my opinion. We definitely we have to take care of these aspects. But I think there is a lot more than privacy, in my opinion. Karthik says Web3 is future. It will become a trust wealth platform that rapidly overcomes the centralized scamming site and recommendations categories that make people to fall for the thing that isn't necessary to them. Yeah, I think absolutely. See, all these recommendation engines based on the machine learning algorithms, all those things are fine. I don't think they are the real problem. The real problem is that the consumer is not being adequately rewarded, they're not being made a part of the profit making that these central entities they do. That is not fair. You are the content creator, you get 10%, 15%, 85% is being kept by the entities, which is not fair, right? I think that is very, very important thing. Mukund Rajan says again, nowadays in YouTube, as we can learn almost anything, but we cannot experience how it works in Web3. Anyone can customize their learning pace with critical understanding of every concepts, can come up with more effective ideas and real world. Absolutely, Mukund Raj. So that's what I was talking about. That how do you see everything could be built in Web3, serving the same business problem, but providing much more freedom, much more participation to the people who are making this system. That is important here. Yeah. So Palais Deek is talking about security. Yeah, security is there. I agree. But then I think ownership is participation, ownership, incentive sharing. These are, very, very important points. Okay. ANOVA says, as the evolving technology creates a great impact in our society, so Web3 will make our society. Absolutely. I mean, see, in my opinion, I absolutely agree with ANOVA that any technology that we are talking about, if it does not impact the real life, then that technology is of no use, in my opinion. The tech has to improve the life. The tech has to improve the way we live. That should be the intent of this technology. And as I look at any technological innovations throughout the history of life, you will see that all these innovations really have improved the way people live. That's very, very important. Yeah, and it improves equality. Vishwanath is saying it also improves equality. Absolutely. See the point, and that's where the gap between the two or the gap between different segments. Why is this gap there? First of all, right? Because somebody has access to information, somebody has got control. Now, the moment you have an environment which provides the equality, then of course this disparity also reduces, right? Yeah, Sachin talks about cyber piracy and middlemen can be prevented by using Web3 where data can be absolutely. Now, there are several types of attacks we already know, but these things could happen at some point in time, Sachin, when we really are very, very clear about, decentralizing every piece of the application. Now, if you imagine today, if you are creating a DApp or Web3 application and a lot of your application also depends on the, the Web2 piece of the component, then you still are living with that problem. But I think this is a progression and we definitely should see some improvement in that. Right. Fantastic. I think so many great thoughts came, from all of you. Mario talks about Web3 will play a huge role in technological democracy, 100%. And I agree with Mario that technological democracy where everybody has got an equal access, everybody is equally being incentivized for participating in the business function due to the technology. That's a great, change for the society. Web3, yeah, absolutely, Mario. I have read that. Karthikeyan talks about using Web3 and blockchain in gaming industry. In near future, it might be revolution for all gamers. 100%. And I think when we talk about gaming, one important thing that comes out there is basically, all the games which were Web2 centered, and whatever you used to earn there, they were of no use. Imagine the world when you are connecting those incentives in the game to a token that really becomes real money. And especially when I think in some time when these gaming platforms, they get interconnected, all these blockchains get interconnected where you are able to take your tokens to somewhere else and either convert them to cash or use that for something else in some other games. That will be the real aha moment in my opinion for for this industry. So with all these things, I think let's start the session now. What we will do, we will start the session today with the leaderboard for the last session, and we'll see how we have done, how you all have done with respect to the session that we did. And then I'll request Rishin to continue the session for today. Okay. So IBC team, please share the leaderboard for today. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so let's wait for the name. Just so Mugil Vendan G, 20 out of 20. Fantastic. Congratulations, Mugil. Pommi Sujita E, 20 out of 20. Not a simple feat. Many, many congratulations. And I look forward to seeing you performing excellent in the future as well. Jessica Margaret Satya, 19 out of 20. Fantastic. Ashok Kumar A, 19 out of 20. A Subha Selvi, 19 out of 20. Sanjani Nandagopal, Harish Narayanan PL, all of you fantastic. I think you are very, very near to the perfection. All of you, fantastic feat, and this definitely gives me a confidence that you are learning things pretty fast. Anova, I see Anova, 18 out of 20, fantastic, very close to perfection. Logeshwari, I saw your name in the past also, fantastic. Gokul S, Vetrivel, Rubia, Surinder S, Vishwanath RR. All of you have done excellent, and this definitely demonstrates your commitment and your attention in the class, what we are doing here. And I'm 100% sure that you will continue your journey. I always say that, this journey, this is just the beginning, and you have to continue on this, make yourself perfect, and slowly increase the complexity of your work. what you are doing right now, what you would try to, how would you take up more complex challenges, more complex problems, that is the mantra here, in my opinion. Okay. But the Rome was not built in a day, right? So what you are starting right now is fantastic journey, and I want to congratulate all of you, from IBC Media side, and for performing so well in the last quiz, and that really gives me a confidence that our effort is definitely in the right direction. So with all these comments, I will request Rishin to come on stage and take the rest of the sessions for the day. Rishin.
Hello. Am I
Yes,
audible?
Rishin. Yeah, I can hear
Thank
you.
you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the intro. And before starting the session, I would like to thank sir for the insight regarding the driving lesson that you shared with us. So we do also work in similar situation with the assignments. The assignments are actually not so very tough. We're actually giving you one of some also simple problems. So it is better trying the simple problems so that you get the concepts and then you will work on to the harder problems. That's the best way to learn. Okay.
Absolutely. I think we are not able to see your camera, Rishin.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn it down. I think now it's visible,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it is so good to see the teacher.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll share my screen as well right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you can see my screen, right? Yeah, you can see it, right? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And we'll start the session and welcome everyone to the third session of Rust. So before starting into the session, I would like to say that we would have to discuss some of the previous questions in the previous quiz because we do find that discussing these questions are relevant. Okay. So if you have done this quiz, then obviously you know this question. That this question number 2 states that what does the below statements infer? And now what we are trying to do here is to create a string called S1, and then we are moving the value to S2. So this is a pretty easy question regarding the ownership as well as the borrow. So here what we are trying to do is we are going to send the ownership from S1 to S2. Okay. Now what actually happens here? So a copy of the value in S1 is binded to S2. No, we are actually not copying the value. No. Second option says that the copy of the data on the heap that the pointer is stringed. No, we are also not going to take a copy of data on the heap. Now, what we exactly do is the third option. The third option says that copy the pointer, the length, and the capacity which are on the stack. So what we are trying to move is just the contents of the stack. And as far as string is concerned, there is no data in the stack, but there is only these three components on the stack. Okay. And that is what we move. Now we will be discussing the question number 12. It's also relevant to be discussed. Yeah. So in this question, it says that what is the output of the following program snippet? Okay. Now what we are trying to do is we are going to create a string hello, and then we are trying to calculate its length by passing a reference to it. Okay. Now if you see that the function calculate length actually takes an AND string and then it tries to return an I32. So if you do try running this program, then you have an error. That is the answer to this question. That is none of the above. And why is that error occurring? So basically, when we are trying to pass an AND string into this, obviously the function tries to computes the length of the string. But then the problem is we shouldn't limit the length to I32 because there could be a chance of panicking at any point of time. And this is why Rust actually prevents us to return the length in I32. It wants us to do it in U size. Okay. So we need to consider as large as possible the size so that we prevent a future panic situation. Okay. So Rust tries to be preventive in case of panic because it doesn't want a situation where we actually overflow the data structure. But in case of C bar C++, it is possible. What happens is that if you go beyond the int value, then it will return some kind of negative values, right? Obviously, you have learned the logical systems and binary, you know why it actually generates these negative values. Okay. But then Rust doesn't allow these things because it tries to be as safe as possible. Okay. Now we will talk about the question number 14. Yeah. So in question number 14, this is actually a question related to the concepts of string that you will learn obviously in the next module. But then it is worthwhile learning it right now. So it is actually a simple concept, but then it is indeed a new knowledge for you guys. So which is used to concatenate the strings X, Y, Z. So if you see into other languages like Python, Java, etc., you can actually concatenate strings by using the plus operator. But then in Rust, it is actually not possible. What we will use to concatenate string is a function called push str, but then it is only available for us to use this push str if and only if the content that we pass into the push str is actually an and string. Okay, it means an and str. But as all the examples here, like let x equal to x to string, so y equal to y to string, so all these things are actually string data type. Now to concatenate all these string data types with another string data types, the function that we use is called, sorry, the macro that we use is called as the format macro. The format macro is used in such a way in this syntax. So what happens is that we need three of these containers and then we will pass the XYZ. So what happens is that it returns the concatenated string. Okay, it is worthwhile noting this point because this is how we concatenate in Rust. And we will see some of the similar examples as we move on with the concept of strings. Okay. And it's clear, then we'll go to the session. Okay. So in the previous section, we used to have a lot of theoretical concepts in our discussion, especially in the ownership, the borrow. Those are some hazy terms. And if you have worked upon the examples that I tried to implement, then obviously you'll be getting the concept as easily as possible. But then as I mentioned before, it is a bit harder to start with, but then if you get the concept, then it is going to be very easy journey for you. Because any others in the coming sessions, we would be trying to discuss all these data structures based on ownership and borrowing. So I wish that everyone knows what happens with the ownership and borrowing concept. Okay. Now, in today's session, we'll be doing some of the we'll be discussing some of the most interesting topics like struct, enum, and other operations on both of these complex data structure. Okay. That being said, let us begin. So what is a struct? The first question. So basically, struct is a container that allows you to have some set of values or related data. Okay. And it will also allow you to give that container a name called a struct name. So what happens is that a struct is a structure which allows you to generate custom data type, and that lets you package together and name multiple related values. That means, for example, imagine that you want to store your student details. You can do this in multiple ways by using a database, by using a file, etc., etc., etc. Well, how can you actually write a program that takes in input of your name, your class roll number, and then say your age? So we only have three fields. Okay. Now, how can we create, or how can we use a data structure to take these three inputs and then keep it with us as long as the program is live? So basically, this can be done in three ways. Sorry, basically we can do this in multiple ways. And I would organize this into two ways. So you can have three arrays of name, age, and then roll number, and then you can access them by using the index. Okay, but then that is actually a very easy way to do this problem. So what we will do is we will keep a struct, and like say the struct name is struct student, and then we will have the fields like name string, then age I32, and then roll number, which is again I32. So it could be I30. Why are we choosing I30? We can actually, these things are positive. So you could come up with like U32 is fine because we don't want negative values. And obviously that is why we use the struct, because struct is an organized way of approaching most of the problems, especially when we have related data to be kept as a single entity or a single unit. Okay. And that is what has been explained in the third point. That is, in general, we can say that struct holds related data together as a single unit. So an instance can be created. So what is an instance? So basically, we don't have something called as an object or a class in kind of Rust. So we do create the objects by using structs, and the IMPL is then used to implement the object-oriented programming in Rust. So we don't have something called as a class in Rust. What we have is a struct and IMPL. IMPL is used to write the functions for a particular struct. Okay, so that is how we implement the object-oriented programming in Rust. So struct is very important for us because you are going to see literal struct everywhere in any kind of production level programming software. So it is literally important for us to learn struct. Okay, now, so this was one of the examples that I mentioned here, and we'll see a similar example. Okay, so before getting into an example, I would like to say some of the rules to create a struct. So to define a struct, we should enter the keyword called struct, and then we can enter the name. Okay, now the standard convention for Rust or most of the languages do keep this convention called as camel case naming of the structs. So you should keep in mind that it's better, or it is a convention to type the struct names in camel case. Okay, you might know camel case. It starts with a small letter and then, or the starts with a capital letter and then it goes more, and then it again becomes caps when you start with the next word. Okay, obviously you know in camel case. Now a struct's name should describe the significance of pieces of data being grouped. It is up to you. And then inside the curly braces, we define the name and type of data. This is very important. We need to also define the name, and correspondingly, we need to define the data type that each field holds. Okay, that is all about it. Now, an example of struct is this, that is struct user active bool, username string, email string, sign in count is 64. Now, I don't want to take you through this bit of like harder example reason. So we will try to see an implementation which is rather more easy. Okay. So let me say I want to create, I think my screen is visible, right? Yes. So let me see. Yeah, I think now it is going to be visible. You want to start creating a struct, you need to use the keyword struct. And then if you want to create a student struct, then you will name it as student. Okay. Now we need some entities or some fields into this struct. Let's say we are going to give the first one to as string. So that is name, which we said as string. Okay. So the name should be string, obviously. Then age, which I'm going to set X data type to be U8. I think that is enough for age because nobody lives beyond this. Nobody lives beyond around like 2 per 8, right? So that is around 255 age. So 255 years of age, I don't believe in it. Okay. With that consideration, we are going to set the data type as U8. And then let's say we are going to give something called as roll number, which in case we will set it as U32. Okay. And then if you see closely, what we have did here is we used the keyword struct and then we gave it a name. It's in camel case. And then we have given 3 fields with the corresponding data types. Okay. And it is very important for us to remember that we use a comma to separate all these fields. Okay. Do not misunderstand or like confuse it with the colon. It is always the comma, and the comma is a must. Okay. Now, so this is how you instantiate, or you just create a struct, and struct definitions must be done before the main function. That is the convention, and that is how you should approach a problem. First, you will keep the use statements, and then you will come up with the structs or the definitions, and then you need to type in the main function. Okay, I'll go back to the concept. Now, to use a struct, we need to create an instance of it. Okay, that means to create an object or something like that of the struct. So now we have defined a struct. It is similar to, like, see, in the case of functions, we defined a function and then we call the function, right? In a similar way, we have defined a struct. Now we actually want to use that struct to input some values, and this can be done by instantiation. So how will we instantiate a struct? So to instantiate, we need to create an object, and how we will do this is basically, you can see in this example that let user1 is equal to user, and you will create an instance. Okay, that is how we create it is simple for, I will actually show you an example with our considered example. Okay, see, now we need to create an object of this struct. So what we do is let student1 is equal to, and you need to type here student, okay, and then name. What is name? Name is string from let's say Jaka, and then with age x 20, then you'll go with roll number x 34. Okay, and now we need to put a column. Yeah, now there is no error in the code. As far as there is no error, we are good to go. Now we have given some set of values, and this student1 is actually an instance of the struct student. Okay, so it's actually a particular example that we have taken. So student1 is actually an instance of the struct student. We can have multiple instances for the same struct. So then why we create a struct? We need to have that same ordering in all the instances. And also we need to have only these amount of data and against corresponding given data type. So we need to organize everything. Then that is why we use struct. So struct is widely used everywhere because we need to organize our data. Now there is one simple way to print this instance that we have created, that is println. Need to put this, okay, and you need to add the debug macro, which we will discuss in a while. But then, yeah, it is very important for us to have this debug macro to print our instance. Okay. Okay, I think that is enough. But then, yeah, we also need to add the hash derived debug. Okay, this is also essential as far as printing struct is concerned. Okay, so this is called as a debug trait implementation for printing the instance of struct. So struct is considered as a complex data structure, and hence you require the debug formatter, and this is called as a debug formatter. There is nothing much to do. What you need to do is within the container you need to put this question mark and this corresponding symbol. Okay, then you can actually print a struct and its contents. Okay, and what we will do is we will do the cargo run, good old cargo run. It takes some time to execute. Then, yes, as you can see, it is student and the name is set to Raghav, age set to 20, and roll number is. So this is how we work with structs. Okay, so we work with struct, we will define a struct, and then we will create an instance. And then if you want to print the data, then we'll print it by using the debug formatter inside the container. Okay, so these concepts are very important for us to move forward. I wish you do the examples as well. And yeah, ask doubts if you have any. Okay, then. So we have seen how to instantiate a struct. We have seen how to define a struct. Now let's see how we can do some implementations as well. Okay. Now, how to access a value from struct? Now we see that how we can input a value to struct, right? Now, how can we access a value from struct? Okay. So to get a specific value from struct, we use the dot notation. Okay. Now, how is that possible? So if you have created an instance and you need to only access one of the data from it, then obviously you can do it by using the dot operator. For example, right now we created something called a student1. Now, if you need to get the name of student1, then you can actually do that by returning student1 dot name. Okay. If you call student1 dot name, it will contain the name called Raghav. Okay. It is as simple as that. Now, yeah, it's time for your first quiz of the day. I believe you understood the concept that we have discussed till now. Now we will jump into the quiz. Okay. Everybody be ready. You'll have 90 seconds to answer all these questions. Try to do it as fast as possible. That is U8 and U32. Mario Francis. U8 is 8-bit unsigned integer, and U32 is 32-bit unsigned integer. That means positive integers, but 32 bits. So you can have a range of from 0 to 2 power 32 minus 1. Yeah. So that will be a range of having these numbers. Okay, 51%. Okay, now we have 52% has participated in the poll. Guys, do try the polls. It will be interesting to move forward if you try the polls. Yeah. Yes, the time's up. I'll share the results with you. I think now you can see the answers. So in the first question, to access values from struct, we use which notation? Yeah, most of you have given the right answer, and that is the dot. And the second question is a struct name should be in camel case according to the Rust convention. Yeah, literally 75% have given it as true. I think, yeah, you are listening. Nice, guys. We'll go to the next content. Okay. The next thing is about filling fields of one struct from another. And this means this is actually an easy way to work with structs. That means if you have, let me say, like if you have two related structs, and that is user and then user one and then user two. So user is your struct, and then you have user one and user two as two instances of the same struct. Okay, so user one here, and then user here, user one here, and then user two here. So these are two instances of the same struct. Now then you have some of the data which can be present in both of these. That means user one and user two should contain the same set of data. So no matter how many users that you create from that struct, you need to have the same value set for all for say certain type of fields. For example, here, if you look carefully, except the email, everything else shall be same as that of user one. So for user two, we can have the data in user one for every field except the email field. Okay. So this is how we autofill this data, and this is autofilling of data from user one to user two. Okay. Now, why is that so important? Because if you see back here, the struct we created actually contained these fields, that is active equal to true, username, email, and then sign in count. Okay. So let's say we are going to make everything same, like the active equal to true and sign in count is equal to 1. Let it be same in all the users. Okay. Then we need to only type in these two values, at the username and the email for each of the instance that we create. Okay. We do not have to type in this active equal to true and sign in count equal to 1 in every instance that we create from the same struct. Okay. Rather, we will just type the first instance created into it. So the data will be auto filled. I believe you got the idea of auto-filling data. Okay. Yes. Now, we have discussed about the normal structs till now, and the struct syntax, how we create structs, how we access data from struct, how we define, how we print them. Okay. Now, there are another kinds of structs as well. And one such example is called as tuple struct. So what is similar to with tuple struct is that the concept is literally the same, but then tuple structs do not have field names, but they do have field type. Okay. So this is very important for you to recognize that tuple structs do not have field names, but then they do have field type. So an example is struct color I32, I32, I32. Now this struct can be used for us in especially in graphics module, where we can set the color to a particular pixel. Okay, so basically we will set the color using the RGB and it is actually a tuple. The RGB is actually a tuple. Now this this tuple struct can be then used to set the color values for each pixel. Okay, so it's actually used in the backend to display all these kind of graphics or any kind of thing that you see in the say in your system or in your TVs or anywhere. But then it is not, might not be implemented in Rust. But then that is the concept behind tuple struct. Okay, it is just to create a struct, but then you don't have a field name, but you do have a field type, and then there is also an ordering. Okay. So as you can see, let black equal to color 000. As you know in graphics, if you have learned graphics and image processing, you know that initially the color reset is 000. Okay. So these are some of the examples that I said, like let origin equal to 0.000. Okay. And that's it about tuple structs. Tuple struct, the concept is easy. It is similar to what we have created. Now we will have unit struct. Most people get confused with unit like struct because they do ask, why do we create unit struct if we do not have any fields in the unit struct? Okay, so in a unit like struct, what happens is that you do not have any fields in it, and you also do not have any kind of data type. So why do we use it? So that is why we do have an example of implementation where we actually use the unit extract, and that is it is useful when you need to implement a trait on some type but don't have any data that you want to store in the type itself. So we are going to implement a trait. We will be discussing about traits in the 5th session only, so you don't have to worry about the traits. But then currently just know that we are having unit extracts, and then it allows us to create a struct, like our example here, struct always equal, and then we will just type it, let subject is equal to always equal. Okay, so these are mainly used in case of trait implementations, and not because we cannot use it to access any kind of values because it doesn't hold any values. Okay, so keep it in your mind. It is for your knowledge. Okay, now we will see how to work with the structs in Rust. Let me say we are going to create a struct called a rectangle with width U32 and then height U32. Now we create a function called fn area, which takes the instance of this struct as input and it returns U32. So what happens is this struct rectangle, we will create an object or an instance of this struct rectangle in the main function, and then we will put this instance as an input to the area function, which in turn returns us U32, that is the area of the rectangle. So what it does is this struct is then created as an instance. It is passed on to the function. The function then takes the width and the height using the dot operator, and then it multiplies both of these values, and then it returns the area. Okay, this is what is happening in here. If you see in the main function, we will create the instance of the rectangle by using the rect1, and then we'll pass two values, that is the width equal to 30 and then the height equal to 50, and then we are going to pass this to the area function by using a AND operator. Now, is this AND operator important? Because we are actually passing a reference of the object. Now, what happens if you are not passing the reference of the object created? If you were to pass a rect1, then the issue is that you are actually passing the ownership of the object or instance created in the main function to the area function. That means you are actually passing the ownership of rect1 to the area function. Now the problem is then you cannot access any of the data from rect1 inside the main function again. So we don't want to pass ownership. What we do is we take a borrow, and a borrow can be taken by using a reference, and that is why we use area and rect1. Okay, I do believe you understand why we have passed the and rect1. So let's try to implement this. Okay, let's try to implement this. What we will do here is struct rectangle. Okay, and we need camera case, so we'll start with rectangle. Struct rectangle, and let's say length, which is U32, and then width, which is also U32. As these things are positive, We will keep on with U32. Then let's write a function called function area, and it should take an input called as a rect, and rect should have a data type of and rectangle. Yes, and it should return the area, which indeed is again another 32. Okay. Now we have rectangle, and then we are going to return U32. So how will we access? We will say like rect dot length. Okay, it is a type error. Rect dot length star rect dot width. This is what we have to return. Okay, so what happens? We are actually using the dot operator to access the values that are present in the length and the width. Now we need to call this function. Okay, so what happens is we will create an object. Let rect1 is equal to rectangle, and then need to put it out here. So let's say the length, which is 40, and then the width, which is let's say 50. Okay, so 40 and 50, and then let let a is equal to area of and rect1. So we are actually passing the reference into a. Now let's print a line. The area of the rectangle is, and then we will type a. So what happens? We have been returned with the area, and then we will print the area. Okay. Let's see what happens when we do the cargo run. You can see the terminal as well, right? Yeah, the area of the rectangle is 2000. I think now you can see the terminal as well. Okay. So this is how we do it. We'll use a dot operator. We will access the data, and then we will compute the area. Okay. Here we have returned the value. You can do this in either by having like return here, or else again just do the same without the return as it is the last statement. Okay. You discussed about the return function. You can use any of these two ways to return the area. Okay, then we will go to the next concept. So we have discussed the example program using Rust and with Struct. Okay. So that is what we did. Now you will say, what is the debug trait? You have seen me using two things called as this debug formatter, and that was the question mark symbol that we added inside the println. And that is actually implementing the debug trait. Okay, so it helps us to specify that we are actually using the debug format specifier. This debug format specifier allows you to print some of the complex data structures like vec, struct, enums, etc. Okay, so it is important for us to use the debug format specifier. And sometimes we will be also using the pretty print. Pretty print allows you to have the correct indentation while you print on the screen. Okay. Now there are two classes that you need to understand, because if you are trying to print a struct with the normal println, it will say that the default setting or the default trait implemented for println is the display trait. Then the display trait cannot actually be implemented for these kind of data structures. And that is why we will use the debug format specifier. We will have to actually hash derive the debug trait in order to do this too. And these were the two points that I added into my code in order to make the struct visible. And hash derive debug, and then, but you don't have to worry about that. Obviously, if you are trying to print a struct, the compiler will prompt you to do these things in order to print the struct. So as the struct compiler is so intelligent, it helps you with a lot of error correction. All you need to do is try doing as much examples as possible so that you'll get in touch with the compiler and how it works. And obviously there is a lot that the compiler will help you in finding where compared with any other kind of compilers that we do have at this time. Okay. And so this is what we have to talk about in the debug trait. Now, what is the debug macro? The problem with the debug macro is that it actually takes the ownership. So debug macro takes the ownership of an expression. The problem is, as it takes the ownership, we are must to be kept in mind that we need to only pass the reference. We shouldn't pass the rect one into the debug macro. If you pass the rect one into the debug macro, that means it eats it. What happens is that you cannot access the rect1 components after this debug macro call. So it is always advised to pass the reference rather than the value itself. Okay, these were the concept that we were discussing last day session about the ownership and borrow. I need you to keep this concept in mind, because then that is how you will work on the next sessions as well. So the debug macro takes ownership of an expression, and it prints the file and line number where the debug macro call occurs. So this debug macro can also be used to print the contents of a struct by you just writing it. Just create an instance like let rect1 equal to rectangle with 30 height 50, and then call the debug macro. Okay, but make sure that you pass the reference. Okay, if you pass the values, then obviously you cannot access the data on later time. So we don't want debug macro to take ownership. So we use a reference to rect1. Okay, I think the concept is clear. Now it's time for the second quiz, guys. I believe you got the concepts regarding the debug trait and then how we work with structs. Structs are actually a very interesting topic. I want you to work with structs as much as possible, because then it will help you a lot working with production level software. Okay, now let me start the next poll. The second poll has been launched. You'll be having 90 seconds to attempt all the questions. Just 2 easy questions, so you can do it as fast as possible. You can see 50% has participated. Please come upon. We need more participation. Okay, it is time to close the polls. Yeah, we'll make the answers visible. I think it's visible right now. So the first question was, which of the following is the debug format specifier? And the answer is option D, that is colon and the question mark. And the next question was, the debug macro takes a reference of an expression. So most of you have answered it as true, but then it is not true. As I have mentioned before, the debug macro takes ownership and not the reference of an expression. Okay, the debug macro takes an ownership of the value that we pass in. And that is the reason why we pass the reference of the instance into the debug macro the last time. Okay, so because it tries to take the ownership, we'll pass the reference into it. Okay, doesn't mean that it takes the reference of an expression. Okay, don't misconfuse or don't get into confusion. Because basically we pass the reference into the debug macro. Okay, but it takes the ownership. So now it doesn't have it can't take the ownership because we have only passed a reference. But if you pass the instance itself, then it will take the ownership. The problem is you cannot access the data on later time. Okay. So I believe you got the understanding. The answer is actually false. Yeah. Now we'll go with the next slide. Okay. Now we'll talk more about the object-oriented programming approaches. There is methods. So we can actually have methods. What is the difference between a method and a function? So basically, methods are associated with a struct or enum or a trait object. That is the difference. Okay. So if you write some functions specifically for those values which are contained in a particular struct, then we call them as methods. So if you see here, I have created a struct called rectangle, and then I've given two fields for it, and that is width, which is U32, height, which is also U32, and then I've created an IMPL. IMPL means an implementation. So IMPL rectangle will contain all those functions that are specific for the struct rectangle. Okay. So if you want to write some functions, it's basically the object-oriented approach. What happens is that you can have some set of functions specifically for the struct rectangle. Okay. And if you see closely, I have tried to create a function called function area, and I have passed the and self. So what do you mean by and self? So and self means the reference of the self. The self means the structs instance. Okay. So here, for example, you can actually create an instance and call this function called area without passing any parameter, because the parameter it takes is basically the instance. Okay. And it can access the values by using the self.width and self.height, which means it takes values from the instance rather than the parameters, because you don't have to give parameters. Okay, you don't have to like confuse. We'll do an implementation right now. Okay, so this is the example, and then we create an instance, and we will call the area function. As you can see, there is no parameters passed into the area function. What we do is we just call rect1.area. Rect1.area means what happens is it goes to it calls ANSELF. ANSELF means here you have passed the values 30 and 50, right? So the self is actually this rect1. Okay. Now what it tries to do is it tries to multiply the self dot width and the self dot height. And here the self dot width is 30, the self dot height is 50. It will multiply both of these values and it will return the area. Okay. So I will give you an example in this one. So as you can see here, we have created a function area in the previous example, but then it was not done inside an IMPL. So it is not a method, it is just a function. Now we'll create the IMPL rectangle. IMPL rectangle is created, and then you can put this function inside the IMPL. Okay. Now as you put this function inside the IMPL, it's still valid, but then we need to make it a method so that it don't access the object or instance directly. So that is when we pass the and self. Okay. And now you cannot have the rect here because it should be self. Self. Okay. Self means any value that you pass in. Okay. It's corresponding to this one. Now we cannot actually pass this value. What we do is rect one dot area. Okay. Rect one dot area. So what does this function do? It actually takes input as this rect one, and it sees what are its length and width values, and then it multiplies this length and width and it returns the area. Okay, let us see what happens when you run this. Obviously, you should get the answer as 2000. That is the supposed answer that you should get. Yes, as you can see, it has taken the values using the self. Okay. So I think you have understood what does this self mean and the self keyword means. And then IMPL is the keyword that is used to write the methods, and methods are these functions that are associated with a particular struct. Okay, they can use the and self or self to actually access the components that are held by any of the instance upon the function call. Okay, I believe it's clear. If not, then please feel free to ask doubts. Okay. Now, yeah. So what are methods? We'll see some of the explanation. Here we define the functions for a particular struct, and that is why we call them as methods. Okay. After object instantiation, we call these methods using the dot operator. and we should pass the and self inside the functions to describe the IMPL block to access the fields. Now, methods can take ownership of self, borrow of self immutably, as you have done here, or borrow of self mutably, just as like me. That means you can either pass the self, okay, that means you are giving the ownership of the self, okay, or else you can take the borrow of self immutably. Borrow of self immutably means what? That means you are passing and self, okay. Now, what is borrow of self mutably? That means you can also pass and mute self. What is the difference between these three things? The first one is take ownership of self. That means you are going to pass self as the parameter in case of the function area, not and self, but then you will pass it as self. If you see here, we have passed and self as the parameter, but then in case of uh, ownership passing, what we will do is we will just type it self. So it will get the self and it will take the self corresponding values, that is the length and the width. But then we can also do it in a borrow self immutably. And that is what we have done here. That is and self is being passed. This means an immutable borrow is being performed or it is passed. Okay. And now if you want to use the pointer or the reference to actually change the contents of the instance that you have created, then you will do a borrow self mutably. That means you will pass an and mute self rather than a and self. Okay, that will help you to change the values of the instance that you have created. Okay, that means I can change my length and width if I am going to pass and mute self. Okay, see all concept. So if you want to change the instance that we have called the method on is, then we would use the and mute self as the first parameter. Okay. Now, methods can also have multiple parameters, and also you can use it to compare between multiple instances. For example, if you see that rect1 is created and then you will just give in two values, that is width is 30 and height is 50. In a similar approach, we have created rect2 with width 10 and height 40, and similarly rect3 with width 60 and height 45. We are going to create a function called can hold, okay, and we are going to pass the and rect. So what we are doing here is we are going to compare the rect2 and rect3 with rect1. So an implementation of rect1 is going to be written. Okay, we will be writing an implementation of the rect1, and then we will pass parameters as rect2 and rect3. Okay, let's see how this function is actually implemented so that you can have more idea. So here, as you can see, we will be calling the rect1.canHold and we will pass the reference to rect2. Similarly, you will call the rect1.canHold and we will pass the reference to rect3. Okay, now see how we will implement the canHold function. So an IMPL rect is created. You don't have to look at this area function if it is actually not so important for our current context. But then listen to this fn can hold. Okay, fn can hold will pass two parameters, and that is and self. And self means it refers to the rect1 here. Okay, and then the next parameter that will pass inside the inside this function is the, let's say the parameter name was given other. And what we'll pass is and rectangle. And rectangle means and rectangle means an a reference to the instance or object of rectangle data type. Okay, rectangle data type in this sense the struct rectangle. Okay, now we are interested in returning the bool. Bool means if self dot width is greater than other dot width and self dot height is greater than other dot height, then we will return true, else we will return false, and this is the condition that says so. So what happens here is that, for example, when you call rect1.canHold and rect2, what this function tries to do is basically it will take the width and height of rect1 and rect2 into comparison, and then it will try to do self dot width is greater than other dot width. That means if the rect1's dot width is greater than the rect2 dot width, that means 30 is greater than 10. So the first assertion is true. The next one is we need to compare the rect1 height with the rect2 height, and that is 50 greater than 40. So what it will return? So the println can rect1 hold rect2 will return true as both these statements are true. That is, the rect1 dot width is greater than the other dot width, and the rect2 dot the rect1 dot height is also greater than the other dot height. Okay. So that is how we work with multiple parameters. So how we work with multiple parameters means initially you need to pass the and self, that is a mutable reference to the instance that we are calling upon, and then we can call any other parameters. And if you are going to pass a struct as a parameter, then you will actually pass it in the similar way, that is to pass a reference to the instance. Okay, then we can compare its values using the self dot width and the parameter that you pass. I think that you are clear with this. If you do have any doubts, then please ask in the Q&A. I don't think an implementation is required for this code, because then it is actually a large code to implement. So this is enough for you to understand the concept. What we do here is basically we create 3 instances and then we compare its values by using a can hold function, which actually takes in the reference to the objects. And an IMPL is generated for the rectangle, so that you can actually call this function for the rect1, because an IMPL is required and the IMPL we will call this function. So that means it also allows us to do some kind of function called like rect2 dot can hold and rect1. So you can actually interchange this rect1 and rect2. It will still work because the IMPL is actually performed for the rectangle structure, right? And all these instances can have these functions in both the sides. Okay, I believe you have got the idea. So that is all about the methods with more parameters or multiple parameters. Now it's time to have another quiz time regarding these methods and how we had these implementations. Okay. So I want you to refresh your memory regarding the implementations and the methods, and then I'll be launching the next quiz. Yeah, the quiz has been started. You'll be allotted 90 seconds to answer, and I want everyone to answer. Yeah. And 61% have participated. Time on, guys. We need more participation. Okay, the time has up. So we'll share the results. The first question was, after object instantiation, we can call methods defined in the struct using the dot operator. Yes, 88% have answered it as true. Okay, there is a typo error, that is true. Okay. So you got it right. Nice. And then the second question is, methods can take ownership of self, borrow self immutably, or yeah, the answer is false. Yes, 56% has got it right. So it's actually the negative of the statement that I said before. So methods can actually take the ownership of self, borrow self immutably, or then it can also take it as borrow self mutably. Okay, so these things are actually possible for the methods, and that is why this statement is actually wrong. But then you need to keep in mind that methods can take ownership of self, borrow self immutably or borrow self mutably. Okay. And we will go to the next concept. That will be, I guess, enums. Enum stands for enumerations. Enumerations means for this particular data structure, we can have a predefined set of values or possible variants. Okay. So for this data structure, we can have a set of possible variants that is allowed. And each of these possible variants is similar to a tuple. So you can have like different set of values or like different set of data for each of these variants again. So this is one of the reason why enums are used in most of the use cases where we actually don't use structs. For example, let us consider the situation of the IP address. We do have two versions for the same IP address. So we do have two versions called as the IPv4 and the IPv6, right? Now, each of them will have two different data types again. So we would like implement the IP using the enum. Okay, we will be trying to implement using the enum. And why do we do that? Because we can have two possible variants called the v4 and v5, version 4 and version 5 into our consideration. Okay, so that is why we'll use, and let me show you an example so that the idea is, look at here, that is enum IP adder kind. That means IP address kind. We have two different a set of variants called v4, that is the version for normal IP address, and then we have IPv6, and that is the version 6 IP address. Okay, so these are the two set of values that are allowed for that enum. Okay, allowed for that enum. Now then how we will call or how we'll create an instance of this enum. It is possible, for example, let 4 is equal to IP adder kind v4. That means you are actually referring to the version 4 of the IP address. And let 6 equal to IP adder kind v6 allows you to call the version 6. And obviously you will be coming up with a question in mind like, you have just passed two versions, or like you have two versions as variants, but we do not have an option to actually input the value, right? It is also possible because these version v4 and v6 are actually like tuples. So you can create any kind of you can create spaces for any kind of value to be input. Okay, we'll see a similar implementation like some. Yes, you can see here. Enum IP adder will have two possible variants v4 and v6. Both of them then can have the string as input. So now if you see the instantiation, let home is equal to IP adder, and you need to use this double column to have this v4, and then you can input a value for this particular v4 of the IP adder. Okay, so now for the variant number 1 v4, we are going to input a value called as 127.0.0.01. Okay, this is actually the loopback address that we pass in. Okay, now let home equal to IP adder v4 string from 127. So this is the IPv4 address that we pass in. And for the loopback, we will have another example of 1. Okay, so in v6, this is the string that represents the loopback, and in case of v4, this is the string that represents the loopback. Okay, so for the same data type called as IP adder, we will have two possible variants, that is v4 and v6. So we can type in the IP address in both the formats by just having this IP adder data type. Okay, so actually structs and enums are used to implement complex data structures or data types as required. Okay, so this allows you to have custom data types, and that is why we use structs as well as enum. So you can create data types and data structures. Okay, then yeah. So this is a function call that takes a string argument and then returns an instance of the IP adder type. I believe you got the idea, and we'll try implementing one enum. Let's say, but then the point is you require to have possible variants and not something like you cannot use this struct rectangle and then length and width. So what is the point? Because these are actually entirely different concepts. Okay, length and width. You require both length and width to find the area, right? But then V4 or V6 are actually possible variants. That means either you can have V4 or then you can have V6. So you require some kind of variance in order to implement in Enum. Okay, so we will go with the IP adder example. So in IP adder, yeah, change this to Enum. In Enum IP adder, we will call the initial one to be V4, and we can have a string, which is the input, and then we can have the V6 and another string input. Okay, so now this V4 and V6 are actually the, as you can see, it is called as a variant. Okay, it is called as a variant, but then they asked me to convert it to camel case. Camel case means you should start with a capital letter and then you can type everything in smaller case until you start the next word. Okay, now you don't require any of these things. IP adder, then V4, and then just part 127.456.3245. I don't know even if this is valid, but then yeah, I'm going to just pass some set of values. And whatever it is, expected string and found and steer. Yeah, so what you need to do is you need to type to string. So now it solves the problem. Okay, cannot find A. Yeah, it cannot find A because here we have removed the A. Okay, this is not the, okay, now this is how we actually set the value for a particular variant called the V4 for the IP address type. Now, why did I pass this to string? Because my data type here was string. Okay, so basically if you try to pass a string literal like this one, it will be in, by default it will be set to and str, because you can see the data type is and str. But then you can use a toString function to convert this and str to correspondingly the data type called string. Okay, we'll discuss more about strings on the next session, and now just try to understand that these are the concepts that we have for strings. So this is how we create an enum and how we will instantiate examples by using different variants for enums. Okay, these are simple things where all you need to do is to have some practice in order to get these concepts. These are actually very simple things to work with structs and enums. Then there is an advanced implementations for struct and enum, then in case of trait and in case of IMP, but you don't have to worry about it right now. All you need to do is try doing simple problems and the assignment questions that we give you with structs and enums. Okay, it would be a great practice, and then obviously you will get an idea about how to use these terms to create your custom data types. Okay, so you can also have multiple set of values rather than having the V6 string. You can have any number of parameters like U8, U8, U8. Now this is actually divided into 4 sections. So rather than giving it as 127.0.0.1, we can pass this as 127 and then comma 0 and comma 0 and then comma 0. Okay, so that allows us to give the value for each section. We will divide this entire IP address into 4 sections, right? Like type A address, type B, but type B. If you have learned computer networks, then obviously you'll be knowing this concept like type A address, type B address, type C. Yeah. So with this implementation that is multiple U8, you can actually divide these each sections of the IP address. I don't want to go much deep into the computer networks like subnet masking and all, but then obviously that is why we actually divide V4 into 4 different sections. So the first section can be the 127 can be passed into the U8, the next 0 can be passed into the next U8, and then so on. You can type the entire U8 into the V4. Okay. Now it's time for another quiz time to discuss the concepts about enums. Okay, I believe you got an idea, and we will launch next false right now. Yeah, you can start answering. You will be allotted a total time of 90 seconds. And I want maximum participation, so please do try the questions. %, have participated. Yeah, more guys need to come front and try answering the polls, because yeah, it's time up, and I'm going to close the polls. Okay, I'll share the results with you. As you can see, the first question was, which of the following should be used when we have more than one variant for the same variable? That is the enum, and 80% have got it right. Nice. We can create an instance of an enum with any of its variants. Well, the answer is true, and you got it right as well. Nice. So we'll stop sharing and then we'll go to the next slide. So now there is one example of enum, that is one standard library implementation called option, and this option data type is famous for its implementation as well as how it helps us to handle some of the conditions. Actually, the option and result, these are two kinds of implementations of enum that helps us to implement error handling and also to prevent unsafe access. That means, let's say I have an array of 10 terms. Okay, so I can access all these 10 terms from index 0 to 9. But then what happens if I try to access the 11th term, which is actually not existing, right? So when I'm going to try to actually access the 11th term, obviously the program will panic. Panic means it will like exit abruptly. We don't want the program to panic abruptly. So what we do is, we will rather than trying to access the 11th element directly, we will do that by using an option. Okay, if you try to access it using an option I32, then we can have two different variants. The variants are the sum and none. Sum means you have some kind of a value for that particular statement. If not, then you can have the none. Okay, so for the option, you have two variants. Option is actually an enum, and you have two variants called the sum and none. Sum means you have some value and the value is present inside the T. So here the T is actually referring to the generic. Generic means any kind of data type that you pass. For example, let's say it is I32. Okay, so with we will learn about generics in the 5th session only, but then generic means it allows you to have any kind of data type to be passed into the option. Okay, corresponding data type will be used in the sum as well as in the none. Now, you need to also keep in mind of these points. That is, the option type encodes the very common scenario, which is value could be something or could be nothing. So when we try to access the 11th element, obviously there is no value there. So we don't want our program to panic. Then you can do a similar implementation by using option, which actually prevents the program from panicking and handling it in the way which we actually require it to. Okay, we'll see an example, and then obviously it'll be clear with why I say so. Okay. And for example, if you request the first item in an empty list, you would get nothing. In a similar way, if you try to access the last term like beyond the length, then you will get nothing. Now Rust doesn't have the null feature or the null pointer. Okay, Rust doesn't have the null feature, and that is why it has got none. Okay, so none is actually a more safer way to implement the null feature. So here you don't have something called as null. It is actually more prevalent in case of C or C++. We use null to actually traverse through many of the data structures like linked list. But then in Rust, we don't have null. I want you to keep it in mind that we don't have null in Rust. Rather, we will use none, which is actually a variant of the option. Okay. Now, the next, we will see how we can create some of the examples with the option. Okay. For example, if you see that let some number equal to sum 5 means I'm having an option I32 as my data type. So if I pass this, like let some number equal to sum 5, that means the sum number will be having a data type of option I32. Why? Because we have passed sum 5. That means 5 is I32, and obviously this is in I32. Now let some char or char, let some char is equal to sum e. That means the sum char will have an option char as the data type. Okay, option char as the data type. Now in a similar way, you can do let absent number of option I32 equal to none. So these are possible variants. Now I will show some an implementation so that you can get an idea. So here we will not define the option enum because it is actually present in the standard library. We do not have to define anything. All you need to do is to just call it. Okay. Now let x equal to sum of 32. So obviously it is going to derive the data type itself, and that is option I32. Okay. So it is let x option I32. Now you can actually give another example called let y equal to none. Okay, this is also possible. Now here the option is unknown. Okay, so then here it says cannot infer type for the data type and declared on option. So what we will do is we will just give in the data type, and that is option I32, and here we can have the none. So none means you are actually not having a value, and then sum means you are having a value and the value is inside the sum. Okay. Now we will see how we can actually access the value from the sum. Okay. Now that is actually done using the match statement, which we'll learn in a while. Okay. So this is how we create variables that actually has a data type called option I32. In turn, option is an enum representation that is present in the standard library, which has two variants called as the sum and none. Okay. Now, what is a match? Match is very, very important for you to learn, as we will work with both option and result. Okay. So in both of these implementation, match is so vital. And if you have worked with C or C++, then you'll be familiar with something called some statement called a switch. Now, match is actually a similar implementation of switch, which is actually present in C or C++. If you have worked with Python, then you will know there is an implementation called as multiple if-else. Match can also be used for multiple if-else statements. Okay, so what we do is, for example, look at here, match is actually a extremely powerful control flow construct that is used to compare value against a series of patterns. Okay, now let us see this example. Look at here, we have created an enum called coin, which has got the variants called penny, nickel, dime, quarter. If you see, all of these are variants of the enum called coin. So when you use an enumeration, make sure that every field you type in is actually a variant of some type. Okay. For example, let's take an example called hairstyle. We will have different kinds of hairstyles. It can be represented using an enum. Okay. For example, you can also have subjects. You can have different subjects. Okay. So it should be invariant. Okay. It shouldn't be dependent, but then it should be variance. It should be variant. It shouldn't have any dependence. Okay. That is where we use enum or enumerations. Now, in this example, fn value will create a function that will return an U8 after taking an input as an enum coin. Okay. So it takes input as an enum coin and it returns a U8 value. Now we will see what it does. So it does match coin. If so, this is actually, it means if coin and this double coin, this means you are actually going to access the penny. Okay. So coin penny, then you need to return 1. Okay. If it is coin nickel, then you need to return 5. If it's coin dime, then you will return 10. And if it's coin quarter, then you will return 25. So this is actually, you are going to take a enum and its corresponding fields, and you will return numbers corresponding. So that means a penny's corresponding value is 1, whereas a nickel's corresponding value is 5, and the coin's corresponding value or the price is 10, and for a quarter it is 25. Okay, so a match is used so that we do not want to write multiple if-else statements. Okay, rather we can actually do it by accessing the match coin and then setting the values to the right hand side and defining the terms on the left hand side. Okay, and that is the implementation that we see here. Now let us say it for the same example here. Okay, so match X sum Y return. Here we are not going to return, right? We will just write println we have a value and it is Y, and you should make sure that you add this comma after each of the terms. Now we have implemented the match for the sum. Okay, now we are missing out something, and that is we have not implemented what happens if there is no value for X, and that is a none. So none, and what we will do is we'll try to return println there is no value, and then don't forget to add the comma. So now if you execute this program, as I have given X to be sum 32, it should give me the first print statement, right? Take some time to execute. Yeah, we have a value and it is 32. So you should listen to me, like when I'm going to discuss, like you have set the value of X to sum 32. Okay, now how did I implement the match statement? I tried to implement using the match keyword and then call the X. Okay, then we have implemented 2 different variants, that is for sum and for none. Okay, by actually adding a comma between them to differentiate their implementations. And then I have typed in Y. Okay, so this Y could have like any name, any arbitrary name. So it's like you can write some Z, some Y, some X, or some A or anything. It doesn't even have to be like given a data type. All you need to do is some Y or some X. Then you can actually access that X or Y by using the statement. So what happens is that if there is some Y, then you can actually print the contents of the Y by using such an implementation. So if there is some Y, then you will print ln we have a value and it is this Y, right? Okay. And in the case of none, what we will do is we will print there is no value. So it is actually safer way to attempt this problem by using the none, because then we can just print the error and go on with the execution of our program rather than having a panic. Okay, rather than having a panic. Now let us say, okay, we will see some of the examples after into this match statement, and then we will see the next implementation. So I think as far as you are clear with this coin penny implementation and also one of the similar examples that I have shown you right now. So this actually is being done with the enum, and the example that we saw right now was working with option. Okay, so both of the concept remains the same. What it does is it takes the enums variable and then it tries to compare it against each of its variants, and then we will return or we will like print something corresponding to each of the variant. Okay, this is possible by using the match. And this is another example, match X none option I32. So it means fn plus 1 is a function that takes in an option I32 and it returns another option I32, where what it does is it takes a particular, like you are going to pass option 1, then it will return you option 2, because you will increase the sum by 1. If some value is present, then it will increment that value by 1. So if you look here, match X, if there is none, then it will return none. Now, if there is some value, let's say some I, then you need to return some I plus 1. Okay. So what happens if you are going to pass option 2 or option 3? Let's say if you are going to pass option 2, then it will return option 3, right? You're going to increment the value by 1. Else, if you are going to pass none, then it will return none. So let 5 equal to sum 5 and let 6 equal to plus 1 of 5. Okay, plus 1 of 5, what will it do? It will take the sum 5 and then it will increment the 5 by 1. So you will get sum 6 as the let 6. So let 6 equal to what? Sum 6. Okay. Now let none equal to plus 1, none. In case of none, the implementation corresponding with the match statement is none. So you do not have to do anything, just return none. In case of sum, you need to increment its content by 1. Okay. So this is how we will work with sum statements and how we will access the content inside a sum statement. I want you to keep attention into this I and then this I plus 1 being returned. Okay. Now, this is very, very important statement that you need to consider. That is, match statements are exhaustive. Oh, what do you mean by exhaustive? Exhaustive means we need to match for all possible fields that the enum has. Okay. For example, let's say let z equal to 5. Now, match z1 gives println the number is 1. 2 gives println the number is 2. Now then you cannot stop at here. Okay, you cannot stop at here. You need to like implement this for every other possible value that you can have. So for any other value, println greater than 2. Okay, but such an implementation would sometimes be wrong because you see you have put let z equal to 5, right? Now by default it will set z as I32. Then in this kind of a scenario, for 1, it will print 1. For 2, it will print 2. And for any other value, it will print greater than 2. But then what happens if you set z is equal to -2? It will still print greater than 2, right? Because for any other value, it will print greater than 2. So it doesn't check. What it does is it takes it as a default value and then it implements it for any other value that is actually not specified in the match statement. So this is really important for you to add the underscore for any other statement that is actually not explicitly defined inside the match statement. Okay. So the underscore is important. And if you do have any unimplemented case, then you need to include the underscore. So that is the point that you need to recognize regarding match statement. That is, match statements are exhaustive. Match statements are exhaustive. That means you need to match for all possible fields that the enum offers. Okay. Now, a similar implementation is called if let. So if you do not want to use the match statement and you do not want to add the underscore for every other statement, then you can use the if let syntax that lets you combine an if and let into a less verbose way to handle values that match one pattern while ignoring the rest. Take your attention to that example. Here, you have tried to create an option I32 called let config max, which is then substituted the value called sum3ua. Okay, sum3ua, and then there is a typer. I think they have tried to pass 38. Okay. Now, if let sum max equal to config max, print ln the maximum is configured to be max. So what we are trying to do here is rather than using a match statement, we will check if let sum max. That means if there is sum for max, then we can print the max. Okay. Else you do not have to do anything. So you do not have to give this underscore statement and then set it for all the other cases. Okay. As if you see in the last example, the underscore is actually a mistake. Why? Because it is for I32. And for I32, you can have negative values which are actually not greater than 2. Okay. So here, what we will do is we will just write the required condition only. So if let sum max, then conflict max. Okay. You can have an else statement for if let. That means if it is not happening, then what you need to do. And if you are going to use an if let else together, then it is actually similar to the match statement. Okay. There is not much of a difference. So that is it. If you don't want to include the underscore, then if let enables us to only match what is required and the others, and we can add an else statement with this rather than an underscore. Okay. So if let is similar to match, except that we only need to implement those cases that are required and we do not need to consider the else statement in most cases. Okay. So now it's time to go for another quiz time. Okay, I want you to get ready, and the question is launched. You will be given 90 seconds. Please do try to answer these two questions, which are actually short and easy. Okay, now we have come to an end for our polls. Okay, now next time up. I'll share the results with you. Yeah, the first question was Rust has a null feature, and it's like 56% of you have has given the answer called true, but then I've just mentioned it that Rust does not have a null feature. Rather, we do have a none, but then none is actually not trying to substitute a none. Okay. We don't want these panic conditions to happen by using none. That is why we have a match statement in order to resolve this none kind of scenarios. So basically, Rust does not have a null feature. So the statement is false. Okay, I don't know how you guys have got it wrong. And then enums are non-exhaustive. The answer is false, and 61% of you have got it right. That is, the enums are non-exhaustive. Okay, so it is actually a false statement. Enums are non-exhaustive is a false statement because enums are exhaustive. And then Rust has a null feature. I think you need to revise. Basically, Rust does not have a null feature. Okay, just keep it in mind. And that is it. Okay. So what did we cover today? We have covered about the enums and how to create custom data types and how to have enumerated values. We've also discussed about how we can create custom data types using struct, how we can use struct in different ways, how we can access values, how we can print a struct, etc., etc. We have also seen the option data type that is mainly used so that we can prevent any kind of irregular access, or we can do implementations for the different set of values. Okay, we will see this option data type when we are going to learn vectors in the next module, because we don't want to access any kind of value from the vector or array out of bounds. Okay, so you can try implementing that. It is actually simple. Try accessing an element of an array and then make sure you are going to pass this through an option type. Okay, So if you do not pass through this, pass through an option type, obviously the program will get into an error. Okay. But then if you use an option data type to get that value, then you can have two implementations for that. That is the sum and the none. And for the none case, you can actually return a print statement rather than panicking. But you can also give a panic statement if required. And it is up to the programmer and the requirement whether we will do a panic or we will just do a print statement. Because at some time we require the panic statements because we do not just want to accept every other junk value that we type in or any kind of logic that we try to implement. Okay, we will learn about those things in the fourth session as well, about the error handling. Okay, and then we have also discussed about the enum values that should be variants of themselves. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. Thank you for bearing with me, and if there is any doubts, please feel free to ask. Okay. Praveen sir, Praveen sir or Deepak Singh.
Hey, Rishan. Yeah, I'm here. So
Okay.
great. So Deepak Chaudhary, so we are done for today, right? So anything else that Deepak Singh you want to share right now, or we are ready for the quiz right now for the day?
I think we are ready.
Okay, so why don't
Yes, sir.
you, yeah, why don't you share the link of the quiz today?
Yes.
And right now it is 8:50. So let's have the quiz answered by 10:30. Does that work,
Yeah.
Chaudhary?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Praveen sir. So basically, guys, we have seen a lot of people already participating in quizzes, and our team takes a lot of time in structuring these questions as per each of the sessions. So make sure that all of you participate because your effort is what that actually counts. And even if the answers are wrong, that's fine. We actually appreciate the fact that you will be participating and just sharing what you have learned. So make sure you attend the quiz. And also make sure that you do attempt the assignment, like Praveen sir already mentioned, the timing of when the quizzes will be closed. So 10:30, somewhere around 10:30, we'll close it. And assignments you'll have time till tomorrow to complete the assignment. So make sure you do that as well. And once again, Rishin, thank you so much for such a wonderful session. It was great to have your insights into a lot of things that students have already been querying on Discord. And guys, so just FYI, we see a lot of participation from students who come in on Discord and ask questions regarding their setup and a lot of things that they learn in the session. So in just making sure that you are not missing out on the same. So if you have any queries post this session, just make sure that you put it on the Discord server and we'll address it for you. All of our experts here will be there present on Discord as well. Praveen sir, I know you loved the session. Any final comments from your side?
No, I think it was pretty interesting, and I know that for sure that Rishin has covered pretty complex concepts today. So, guys, I think in any case we will be uploading this video on the IBC Media YouTube channel. So please, if required, if you really need that, please go through that again. And from other sources also, you could try to strengthen your concepts. What we are right now teaching you will be very, very vital when you start building it, maybe in few weeks time, maybe a couple of weeks time from now. So it is high time for you to kind of spend time, strengthen. Don't worry about the whole world right now. Just worry about the concepts that have been taught today, and make sure that you are thorough with that. Okay, don't worry about programming, don't worry about the full-fledged big scale programs and all that. All those things will happen on time, right? So I think what is important for you to be just absolutely thorough with what has been taught today and what has been taught in the previous two sessions. Okay, so if you are just doing it, that you are if you are just making sure that you are uh, current with all these topics, you are good for now. So don't worry anything else right now. Okay.
Praveen sir, I think we lost you there for a second. We are not able to hear you. I hope the network is fine. So
Yeah, no,
guys,
what I was saying that whatever has been taught so far, just make sure that you are current with all those things, you understand those things. Don't worry about the, the overall programming and big complex programs. Everything will happen on time. So don't worry about that. That's what I was saying.
absolutely, sir. And
Yeah.
guys, just to reiterate the fact that what Praveen sir has addressed here, and continue on the same thought, I would say that just keep up the practice. That's what Praveen sir already always emphasizes on. And obviously, Rishina has also put a lot of hard work in this entire process, and the same thing comes out of him and Deepak Chaudhary as well. That you have to keep up the practice, because otherwise you'll just be carrying on what is just happening in the session, and a lot of it depends on what you do away from the session, like what kind of practice and what kind of testing you're doing from your end as well, which is extremely important, because next time when you come in the session, you have to make sure that you are aware of what all has happened previously. So make sure you go and practice as much as possible. I know it's challenging with your college, your tests, and a lot of other things, but everything is worth it. And the more you put in the hard work, as you all know, the end point is to come and build in the blockchain space and take out the amazing grants that we have. So to make sure that you become eligible and become competent to build in that atmosphere, you have to be ready. So just make sure that you put in the right amount of work to be there where we all expect you to be. So once again, guys, thank you very much for attending this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our experts here. And in case, we'll just keep the session open for next couple of minutes in case there are any questions which are pending. But you're free to go and have a great night. We'll see you all very soon, day after tomorrow. Same time, same thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Deepak.
Praveen sir, thank you so much. I just loved how the interaction happened in the start of the session. I just wish we could do more of that. And I'm quite sure that in the next session we'll be doing that as well. So guys, try to join a little sooner. Like, let's say the session is at 7, try to join 5-10 minutes before, because you will get the opportunity to just take a peek at Praveen sir's brain and just asking questions, and he'll be addressing a lot of them. And it's a quite insightful discussion with what happens just 10-15 minutes before the session begins. So make sure you do that. I mean, if you have time, just join in a couple of minutes before, and it'll be fun. Thank you, Rishin. Thank you, Deepak Chaudhary. Thank you, my team members, Rajesh and Deepak Kudem, for organizing this session. Thank you, everyone. And we'll just keep the link, as I said before, open for another minute or so. And then we'll close in for the day. Guys, have a great night. See you all very soon. Stay tuned on Discord and make sure you follow us on our social media handles. And because you don't want to miss the regular clips that we share with all of you. Also, we have organized recently Discord interactive session with one of our experts who was with us on ground, Mrs. Shivam Srivastava. So you can go and check that out on Discord, and more of such interactions will be coming up soon. So if in case you are missing that out because you're absent on Discord, just go and join us over there. So we have a query. Can you send me the link again, sir? Yes. So we have already shared that once again. I hope you got it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We'll close it for the day and see you all very soon. Thanks a lot.